Morning Conversation by Darju Prasetya. The train has just arrived at Baji station. People were busy unloading their things that morning and they were scrambling out the door. Seen hawkers and pedicab drivers fighting in front of the door. Come on, I'll take anyone who needs an invite. The pedicab drivers said. Mr. Sarman, who has been a pedicab driver at Baji station for a dozen years, knows very well the character of the passengers who might rent his pedicab. These passengers will ask to be delivered. Those who look arrogant may not be willing to be escorted. Those with bright faces usually want to be escorted, said Mr. Sarman. When the passengers started getting off the train after a long journey, they usually stopped by the restroom first. Then they Saturday around or just stopped by for a drink at a shop at the station. Mr. Sarman always observes their passing. He reads the behavior of the passengers a lot so that he can get a positive response from them. Talk or chat for a while and finally, they want to rent the rickshaw. It is Mr. Sarman's greatest joy if he can get passengers. In addition, if the passenger gave more tips, he should also be grateful for that day's fortune. He imagined being able to eat that day and coming home with the money. Of course, it will make his wife and children happy who are always faithfully waiting for him at home. The work as a pedicab driver has been his flesh and blood for a dozen years. Mr. Sarman finally knows more about the character of the people he has delivered. He seems to be able to read people's characters. Even his fellow pedicab drivers often refer to him as Pak Ramal. It was thanks to Mr. Sarman's ability to read people's faces. Is it because he knows reading people's faces that Pak Sarman becomes a pedicab driver who is often lucky here? I asked Mr. Sarman that morning. Usually, Mr. Sarman only smiles when someone asks that question. He often assumes what he knows about the ability to read people's faces simply because he is diligent in studying the people he usually brings. In contrast to other pedicab drivers who just deliver, he tries carefully, but they don't know how friendly faces are and how unfriendly faces are. That will determine our sustenance, you know. Because I don't want to force passengers who don't want me to take them. I only read the faces of those who expect me to deliver, said Mr. Sarman with a smile on his lips and a cigarette stuck to his lips. That morning the weather was clear. The sky seems to be providing a pleasant atmosphere for sustenance seekers at Baji station. Pak Sarman had come to the station early in the morning from about 3 kilometers from his rented house. For Mr. Sarman, this work has become a daily routine as a pedicab driver and he is always grateful. He never demands more from God because Pak Sarman always thinks that every creature in this world must have its way of life and destiny. Even if I am like this, I can still send my children to school, said Mr. Sarman, and it seemed that he was a person who accepted or was willing to do what he was doing. Did you have any other work when you were younger? I asked. Pak Sarman seemed to be silent for a while as if he was remembering the past. I just didn't graduate, son. But I used to be a gardener at a school. It seems that it wasn't my soul mate when I served there for a dozen years and I haven't been appointed yet. Perhaps because I don't have a diploma, I would rather leave rather than expect something less likely to be hired. Mr. Sarman's story. The atmosphere at the station is getting busier. After just delivering one passenger, Pak Sarman's body looks sweaty. I also used to be a scavenger, but that didn't bring me any luck either. In the end, I became a pedicab driver. I think this job is the most likely for me to survive, he said, wiping the sweat off his face. Life must be lived under what our destiny allows and according to our beliefs. People like Mr. Sarman are a lesson that we should emulate. We can learn from anywhere about firmness in living life. Aren't you worried about today's progress? Where are online motorcycle taxis that can displace your fortune? I asked. Mr. Salmon was silent for a moment. In his heart, there used to be such worry. But after he thought about it, in every life there are risks, and we don't need to worry too much about the circumstances and times. At first it was so. After I thought about it, however, I became unconcerned, because in life everything has its plot. My sustenance will decrease, but everyone will bring their own. Keep on bringing many blessings, and there are still a lot of passengers who need my services, replied Mr. Salmon with confidence and wisdom. Life is like a cycle, and that's how Mr. Salmon lives his. No matter what storms came his way, the wheel of the pedicab kept pedaling. Pak Salmon has loved this job, and it is the only job he can do. Maybe until the strength in his body is no longer able to pedal a rickshaw, he will continue to do it. He will continue to turn the wheel of his rickshaw and deliver the passengers who will ride his rickshaw. While delivering his passengers, Mr. Salmon usually sings a few songs, so that the passengers are also entertained. His voice was lilting like a gentle breeze. By singing a part for entertaining passengers, I can also reduce fatigue, he said with a smile. Pak Salmon has been working as a pedicab driver maybe since the Dutch era. You can imagine how long Pak Salmon has been in that profession. Even at that time, while escorting a fighter who came from Jakarta at night who got off the main Senya train, he heard many stories about the struggle he would do to reclaim the city of Surabaya, which the Allies would take. I felt a bit nervous at that time because what I brought was a well-known fighter and he was in disguise. I was afraid Dutch soldiers were still roaming the area at that time. Mr. Salmon's story evokes memories of the past. You should be grateful, son, that you didn't live through an era like the colonial era. In the past, people who could eat just one day were already happy because it was difficult to find food. Because all the crops were taken away by the colonizers. Our nation is like a cash cow. Fortunately, no one gave up on that nation because of the warriors. The steadfastness allowed them to fight for their nation. Mr. Salmon, whose eyes were now tearful, revealed that he was only a courier at the time, watching for the movement of the invaders. Perhaps in Pak Salmon's heart, he did not think that the Indonesian people, who at that time only had sharp bamboo weapons, could repel invaders who were armed with more modern weapons. Mr. Salmon continued to pedal his pedicab as he put all his faith in God. We never feel inferior in anything. If we have the determination, are willing to unite, and pray strongly, anything is possible, as God provides help to anyone who needs it no matter what. What seemed impossible would be possible with his power, explained Mr. Salmon. The old foot keeps spinning for some time. The author of this story is Daju Prasetya. Currently, he lives in Tuban, East Java, Indonesia. Email, prasetya58098@gmail.com.